Okay, so now that I'm finally actually done with the steaming process, I wanted to talk about it just a little bit more. I know that this is like the third time I've talked about it on this video, but it's been an evolving process for me, as I assume it is for everybody. And I have learned some things that I thought I'd pass on to you, because there's no point in making this video if you guys can't learn from my mistakes. So you'll have to forgive me also. I'm about as artistic as a second grader. My art skills rival my carpentry skills, so you're going to have to bear with me. But this is my steam box in a nutshell. Plugs into a hot plate on top of a coil that's on a steam, just a stock pot basically. Now, one of the things I've learned is to keep the water level relatively low. Initially, I was trying to fill up the stock pot, thinking it would give me more steam time, but what it does is just bubbles out and over and makes a big mess, and you really don't get good, even steam until the water level is down here anyway, so you might as well start there. That's one tip. The next thing is when you're making your top, make these angled. The heat will tend to warp them a little bit, and if they're angled, then they'll really squeeze down onto the pot well and make a good seal. Also extend them out over the edges, which will help with your seal as well, so that steam doesn't end up leaking out the sides here. And it all goes up through your tube into the PVC pipe. So here's one PVC cap. Your wood would be resting in here, and then the steam comes out at the end. Now, that was my original design. So now if we look at this end cap here, and we're kind of looking at it from this angle, so looking at it face on, we have this as being the initial design. So we're looking at the PVC from the end. I had put a release valve in here for the steam so that it didn't build up pressure. I have my wood resting on just some chicken wire, and that's theoretically was to help give it nice even steam. I've also drawn in the rounded corners on the wood, which is important. You take those off before you steam, because the less wood you have to bend, the easier it's going to be. So round your corners, sand them down, soak the wood, all that before you steam. So now here's the problem with this setup, which I didn't realize, and nobody on YouTube had pointed out as far as I know, is that when you have the release valve up high, steam rises, and so you end up getting a majority of your steam up here, and it all releases out. Well, you have less steam down here, and so you get uneven heating down here. Now, you can flip them over, but that's kind of a pain. I don't know why it took me so long to think about this, but what I eventually did was just spin the cap around so that the outlet valve, let's see if I can get this to focus here. Sorry, there we go. So that the outlet valve is down at the bottom. That makes the whole chamber have to fill up with steam, and so you get nice even heating surrounding the wood. Also, this is your vertical grain wood. We talked about that in another video, but I drew in the grains so that you can see what that looks like. But this gave me much better results, much more even heating. This is at the point where I was bragging about having 85% consistency with a 15% break rate. That was karma, and I, right after that video, broke about 5 in a row. So the next level that I figured out, which somebody did actually recommend, but I got a kitchen timer. Now, this is my only chance. This is the only thing I've ever had that was just lying around for me. Everybody in all the YouTube videos happens to have all these things lying around, whether it's extra wood or a steam box or whatever. This is the only thing I get to say I had in my kitchen already, so I'm excited about that. I use it for cooking steak, but I sacrificed it for the project. But if you don't have one, it's actually, again, I didn't figure it out until the very end, but it's a worthwhile investment because all the guidelines are steam for an hour per inch of wood. Now, that is critically at 200 degrees Fahrenheit in your steam box. And I hooked this thing up, and you can see how much variation there is in the temperature of that box, whether it has to do with the outside temperature or even how tightly my cap was on, or the, some type of, even a wind cooling the whole apparatus over here and lessening the steam output. there is a lot of variation in that temperature. So once I finally put in a thermometer, I could see just a much more scientific approach. Basically, I should have started with that, and I probably would have got more consistent results, because it does show me, it gives a good reason for the inconsistencies that I was experiencing, because the temperature inside of that thing fluctuates, up to 30 degrees over the given time frame. So this is a valuable tool to have. I think this one was like $13 on Groupon. So, it's not a huge investment. Worth having. So I would add that. So that brought me to the last kind of evolution of my end cap, which what I did was ended up drilling 2 holes at the top and the bottom and put in these little cover flaps. And so with that, I could kind of open and close them depending on if the box was too hot or if the box was too cold. So I could kind of capture more steam or release more steam, and try to keep it close to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, maybe it's just luck. I bragged about it last time, but that did increase my success rate a lot, because you can give it a much more consistent time. I feel like part of the reason I ended up breaking a bunch was because the temperature outside increased, and I ended up overcooking a lot of this wood. And so, you can read more about bending, but there's a complex in the wood that's what you actually allows the wood fibers to slide along each other. And if you get it to a certain point and it's nice and flexy, like putty, the wood kind of becomes like a hard putty. Cook it too much and it becomes brittle and flexible. And I think that's probably what happened. Is my box was getting up to temperatures of like 220 almost, and I was cooking it for 45 minutes, which had worked before, but now I ended up overcooking it. One last little tip, again, I drew up here. Initially I put as much wood into the box as could fit, and I knew I didn't want them overlapping or stacked on top of each other, because you want to get even steam all around. But what I learned, even though it's more time consuming, is I only did them in batches of 2. And that's primarily, again, was because it was so inconsistent that I didn't want to ruin 4 or 3 ribs at once. So some batches, worked great, and others didn't work out so well. So I found that by doing them in smaller batches, I was able to save on some material costs a little bit. So those are some tips that I figured out. Take it or leave it. Again, I'm no expert. I could be wrong about all these theories or the reasons why, but this has been what's worked for me the best. And if I were to build another one of these canoes, this is what I would start with: is this setup and a kitchen thermometer that I just happen to have lying around. So that's going to be the last that I discuss steaming, and hopefully it works for you. It was a frustrating process for me, just because it was so inconsistent, and you end up breaking a lot of wood. And it's a process, soaking them and rounding them over and sanding them down and steaming them takes, about 2 hours for each time. And to do all that and then just have them snap in your hands is a frustrating thing to go through. I think it's impossible to avoid all breakage, even if you do it perfectly right from the start. I think a lot of breakage just has to do with the individual piece of wood, any types of weaknesses in there. So expect some frustration anyway, but this should help minimize it. So good luck, and let me know how it turns out.